to another get-together from getAbstract. I'm Andrew Savickas, Chief Strategy Officer at getAbstract. My guest today is Rebekah Bastian, an entrepreneur, writer, artist, tech executive, mentor, wife, mother, and my personal favorite, aerial acrobat. After 15 years at Zillow, with roles including Vice President of Product and Vice President of Community and Culture, Rebekah is now CEO and co-founder of OwnTrail. Rebekah built OwnTrail with the goal of reimagining and scaling mentorship to serve all women. In line with this theme, Rebekah published her first book, Blaze Your Own Trail, in February of this year with Barrett Kohler. Rebekah, welcome. I'm thrilled you could join me today.
Thank you. Thrilled as well.
Well, first, I'd love to talk a little bit about that book. There's a rich tradition of fables among business books. The Goal comes to mind, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But your book, Blaze Your Own Trail, is the first that I'm aware of that adapts the classic choose your own adventure format. Where did the idea for doing the book in that format come from?
Well, I think the idea or the drive behind the book really came from years of conversations with women as I've been in different leadership and mentorship roles that, there's these kind of common themes where I think oftentimes women worry about their through life and, worry about where they're going and how they're going to get there and almost being worried about getting it wrong. The idea of getting it wrong comes from the fact that, we see all these kind of picture perfect end results around us in media and social media, and we assume a linear path to get to those results. And so, the message I've been trying to share with women as I've been talking with them is like, that's not how it works. Path. We all have these kind of twists and turns, but because they don't get talked about as much, we can feel like we're the only ones going through these more difficult kind of situations on our paths. So there's also this kind of lack of solidarity that comes from us not necessarily knowing what's going on. And so the goals for writing Blaze Your Own Trail were really to share the idea that there is no path, that a lot of these experiences are ones that we share with each other. And I did that through this interactive choose your own journey forward and being plotline as well to really kind of shed light on the fact that a lot of these experiences are ones that are very shared amongst women. And actually I hadn't really put together the awareness of a business fable before this. And this isn't necessarily a business book per se, because it really spans a woman's personal and professional life. But it was actually my editor at Barrett Kohler, Anna Leinberger, who was the one that talked for me on that one and said, there's this thing about, called business fables that can be really impactful. And she said, well, this is like, it's kind of taking that same storytelling and but then applying it more to like our whole lives and not just the business. There's one that kind of figured out that genre for me.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think the business fable is an underappreciated kind of subgenre of business book. So it's great to have yours now as an addition to that. Now, you've said that some of the inspiration for the book came from your own habit of quote, saying yes to coffee with a lot of people, unquote, and the conversations that you had over all those cups of coffee.
Yeah.
What are some of the patterns that you sort of picked up from those conversations that helped inform the book?
I think the patterns really are that worrying about what our path is and, kind of thinking we're supposed to know where we're headed. And so, I think I really try to embrace the idea that, there's some good frameworks for how we might think about where we're going next. To follow our passions and go where we're needed, but we don't need to know what that endpoint is, and oftentimes it's not something that we would have imagined anyway. Mm-hmm. Sometimes even when we make a decision, the outcome isn't going to be what we anticipated it would be. So, kind of changing our mentality and it almost is that kind of decision tree framework that the book uses applied to life, which is you make a decision, then you encounter another decision. What are you going to do with that? What are the outcomes? And recognizing that we can be a failure at the end of the day because we're strong enough to make it through even when it's not what we would have hoped or planned for when we first set out.
Right. Now, conversations over coffee, like those ones that you had that helped to lead to the book. Now, those have long been a pretty common kind of networking and informal mentorship kind of tactic. Now, putting aside the current challenges of social distancing, what do you see as the shortcomings, though, of that approach, the sort of, cups of coffee in a coffee shop conversation? What are the shortcomings to that when it comes to mentorship?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and a cup of coffee is actually my preferred form of if I am going to do one-on-one mentorship, like a formal ongoing mentor. But even then, I mean, there's the limitation of time. How many people can you say yes to? And there's also the limitation of access. I think one of the really important things, and one of the reasons that probably a large majority of those coffees I've had have been with women is because those are reach out to me, because it is so important for us to see our same identities in those places we aspire to, or in the people that we call our mentors. And sometimes our purview is limited, like when we're looking at what we kind of are looking for guidance on and who is there and available to give us. It's not all our same identities, just because of the systemic inequities that exist in different industries and workplaces. And so that having enough time to say yes to those coffees, but also having access to the people that you want to be talking to are both limitations that make it hard to scale. And I know that 75% of women say they're not giving or getting the shift that they'd like to be, and I think it is because of those limitations in scale.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Now, after writing the book, you built a website, Owntrailcom, where women, they share their unique life journeys, as you've described, and their own paths. What separates that approach from more traditional kind of professional or personal profile pages like LinkedIn or About Me?
Yeah, so Owntrail, like you said, was really born from an envoy of its own at this point, and it is really trying to capture those journeys and those experiences that are often the basis for wanting to grab a copy of someone and learn from them. And what we're really embracing that I think is different from what's out there, we're really embracing how intertwined our personal and professional lives are, because they are, and there's both from a standpoint, there's a lot of platforms that separate out, this is for your personal life, this is for your professional life, or even the way that, we're kind of structured in our work lives is trying to compartmentalize these, when the reality is that when I look back on my journey and what's made me who I am and what's been like the pivotal moments in my life, it's not just professional, they're just very intertwined. And so we're really embracing that, and we're embracing the journey. I think, like I mentioned, there's a lot of end results that are shown there. I can look at someone's LinkedIn and know what their job titles and accomplishments or awards might. Look at someone's Facebook and see those smiling, happy pictures of them with their friends or their family. And those moments are all true. Those happened. But the journeys behind those moments, and that's, I think, what people are craving right now. We really want the level of authenticity and the journey and understanding what's behind all of those kind of snapshots, and that's what we're trying to facilitate with Owntrail.
Yeah, it's funny for to the extent that people try to keep this facade of work-life balance. I mean, I think what we've all gone through in these last few months is, that kind of crumbles pretty quickly when all of us are just working from home and there's the kids and the dogs in the background and everyone's trying to make sense of all this. So I can certainly appreciate that, we need to think differently about compartmentalizing those two parts of our lives when they are connected and interconnected. Now, earlier you talked about social media and the sort of pressures there, and in fact, I've heard you describe a social media epidemic of unrealistic expectations. Now, how do you see that affecting women in particular in their careers, and what do you see as the sort of treatment for the sickness or the epidemic?
Well, I think that there's kind of this idea that is happening more in the workplace now about bringing your full self to work, which is great as a concept. I think that then it's a little surface level still in a lot of places, in that a company can say, we want, bring your full self, still kind of needs to fit into certain parameters, and the policies and the cultural norms are often such that like a true statement, and it can be hard to. So for women, there's still a lot of social norms that are more masculine inherently. There's certainly the motherhood penalty that is very real and has become much more specific. Like you mentioned, yes, we're all managing personal and professional lives, but women are really, all the different kind of ways of slicing the data, women being the hardest part of that right now. I think different identities around ethnicity and gender orientation and gender identity, like these are all such that like I think a lot of the norms still aren't as supportive, and people are still trying to fit into them. That takes a lot of mental and emotional energy to do so, which can really prohibit what we're able to accomplish. I think that what is lacking there is really understanding and embracing the journeys that got us where we are, the identities that we hold, the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and what does it look like to really embrace all of that in a holistic way where it really is authentic support for it.
Right. Now, you've described some of the interactions that people have on Owntrail.com with a phrase I hadn't heard before, but I thought it was fantastic, and it's micro acts of mentorship. Now, can you say a little more about what that means?
Yeah, definitely. So the idea with the micro acts of mentorship and then what it looks like to combine those is that each one of us can, not an exorbitant amount of time. So it's not like multiple copies a week, for example, or, the kind of unscalable piece of mentorship on Owntrail as a series of interconnected milestones. And those milestones are basically the moments in our life that have made us who we are, that stand out being important to us. And we can go back and add to those as we think of more. And we can certainly add to them as we live and experience more of them. But it's storytelling. It's structured by data, but then it's these stories that are really driven by community. And what happens is each one of them is very powerful in and of itself. But then we get this really rich data set, and what we're building is going to be essentially this neural network of life paths that allows women to navigate both, say I'm going through an experience right now, what are all the different ways that other women have gotten to where I am, and where have they gone? Let me find out more from them about how they navigated this. Or like, there's this thing I aspire to in my life. What are all the different paths that women have taken to that? Or those down to the women who share my same identities or experiences, and be able to experientially realize that there is no one right path, but be able to get inspiration and guidance from other women who have been there. And so each woman is, sharing their trail or answering a question or whatever it may be, which, in and of itself can be a really kind of powerful experience in terms of owning our own narratives. But by putting that out, we meet so many other women, and so it's kind of like it creates that scale, and you combine all those micro acts into this one really powerful, actual place that solves the problems that are behind. When women say, "I need a mentor, I want to give mentorship," we really think we're solving those problems.
Yeah. So a lot of the language that you use in the book and in Owntrail, it's about stories, about paths, about journeys, and there's definitely this notion of a narrative, which makes sense. It's a very human thing to do, to tell stories about ourselves and our past and maybe our potential future. And yet, as you just mentioned, there's also this angle about the data underneath that. And I'd be curious to hear a little more about how you're doing that, how you're taking these sort of narrative story paths and actually putting some numbers behind it, and what do you expect to be able to do with that data as you get more of it in the system?
Yeah. So one thing that I realized when I was writing my book, because I do leave a data bit about women's experiences, there are some huge gaps out there in just the data that is available about women's lives. So once you start to get a little bit more intersectional about that data, so looking at women across the different identities that we hold, there's a lot. So one thing we're really excited to do with Owntrail is to provide a really powerful framework both on the individual level in terms of the data that we understand about how these trails intersect, in order to show individual women, these are the trails that are going to be most inspiring. ones that are going to provide the most solidarity for what you're going through, and kind of that personalized experience. But also, we're going to be able to an act about women's lives that has previously not been available. And what that can do is, hopefully those systems of gender and equity that are out there, right? So as soon as people who are making decisions about women's lives or creating policies or creating, programs or have more data about what we're actually experiencing in our lives, then, better decisions can be made. And there's kind of like a larger macro impact there to be had as well. So we're really excited about, both the micro and the macro of what we can do with this.
Sure. And I know it's still early on, but are you starting to see anything emerge in the data that you have so far that's interesting?
Yeah, there's we're doing our first step of kind of the machine learning and data analysis of this is finding those intersections and trails. And so we've been doing both using the categorization of each milestone in a woman's life. So each milestone you select a category of 40 at this point to choose from. And so that, kind of normalizes the events, but we're also using some natural language processing to understand that writing kind of what that event really was. And then we're able to show kind of the most to your trail. And so we've been playing around with that and starting to read through it. And it's actually fascinating, these connections that are actually really relevant. And you can see how the robots made that connection. But, but it actually it's really fascinating. Now we're kind of looking at it at the individual level, but then being able to scale that is going to be really cool. And we're just starting to scratch the surface as we're, we just 1,000 accounts created on Owntrail right now. So we're still kind of in the early days of having data to work with, but there's some really cool potential.
Very cool. Now, you just mentioned the word connections, and I think when people think about sort of professional or even personal / professional places to share stories, a lot of that traditionally is exactly about that networking, is connections and friending people and following people. But I've heard you make a distinction there that what you're trying to do is it's not a network-based system, it's more kind of content-based. And can you help sort of unpack that distinction and what makes it different compared to, again, a more traditional networking, find and friend and follow model?
Yeah, definitely. So it is a network, but it's a profile-based network. So what that means is that we are there, there is this kind of network effect of, what's related, what's relevant, what's important for you to see, but it's based on the content, based on the storytelling, as opposed to the person. And the reason that that's really valuable is that when profile-based network, there is this kind of winner takes all. Like, you want the most people in your network, you want to be the most popular, the most liked, or whatever. And when it's content-based, it breeds more authenticity. It's really about like, how's, the more authentic and meaningful the content is that I'm sharing, the more it relates to trails, right? And it really, we're building this in a way that celebrates the authenticity. It celebrates the vulnerability and the sharing. It's not about like, and what have I accomplished, but it's about like, what have I been through and how are those stories interconnected with each other. The other thing that's really powerful about a content-based network doesn't require using people's real names. People can use their real names, and right now about half of women are using their real names on the platform, or they can use it if they want to. And it really depends on where you are in your life. Like sometimes we're at a place, like I'm at a place in my life where I'm going to use my real name and I'm just putting it all out, and a place where I'm comfortable and safe doing that. And there's a lot of reasons that women might not be in that place, but they don't necessarily feel like they want authentic stories, and they don't necessarily want that tied to their real identity for everyone. And that's okay too, because it's based on the content. Knowing what a woman has been, she holds, experiences she has, is more important than what her real name is, especially if it's not, someone that a lot of people are going to be searching. So the content-based network enables that as a scenario.
Got it. Thank you. Now, you obviously think about and talk about and write about mentorship in general a lot. And that's an important part of anyone's, certainly work life, but also the personal life. as part of work in many ways. And looking at work, this COVID-19 pandemic is pushing a lot of companies and organizations outside their comfort zone very fast and toward changes that maybe they knew were coming, but nowhere near as quickly as they have come. Because mentorship is such an important part of work for many of us, what do you see as the future of mentorship, especially in light of what's happening now? And has the pandemic kind of influenced or accelerated any of that sort of long-term shift or trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the two big trends are, or maybe not trends, but revelations would be that you can't get everything you need from a single person, right? It's like if you have a perfect pairing of a one-on-one mentor, there's so many different aspects of our life, and we go through so many different phases of our lives that, and different perspectives. There's not like one right perspective. It's really this culmination of experiences. So we can't get everything we need from one person, and it's really about how do we and that's what we're trying to do with OwnTrail, is that can be valuable in a really scalable and accessible way. Mm-hmm. But whatever that looks like, I think even for corporate mentor programs, I think it really should be about kind of the collection of experiences and advice and guidance and reflections, that as opposed to and that's going to be the be all end all for you. And then the second thing is really that I think there's this kind of misconception that mentorship is one directional. Like you have the mentor and the mentee, and the mentor is going to tell the mentee what they need to know, and and I think that everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has different experiences. Everyone has more to learn, and sometimes what we need to learn is something that maybe someone a higher level in their career might be able to give us some perspective on. But oftentimes it's like there's so many different perspectives and reflections that any relationship you have, one that might be a mentoring type relationship, really is bi-directional, and we can both be learning from each other. And with Owntrail, we believe that we don't have we do have user personas, which are a really valuable way of building a product, but we don't think these are the people that are the mentor people. It's like everyone is both. We all have a story to tell. We all have more to figure out. And when we think about this Venn diagram of people that are sharing, the people that are receiving, the ultimate vision is that it's just a perfectly overlapping circle that that everyone realizes that they are both.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you almost see it now with many situations. You've got for example, younger employees and team members helping older ones with navigating the technology that we're all having to suddenly grapple with and trying to figure out how to do this. I mean, I've learned more about Zoom from my 7-year-old son than I care to admit, So you're right. It is a two-way street.
Yeah.
Now you're
surprised you don't have dinosaurs in your background or something there.
Exactly. So you mentioned the sort of corporate world, and obviously you're at a startup now, which is very different from a traditional corporate environment. But you did spend a lot of time in the corporate world, and interesting. Speaking of paths and journeys, you spent time in product management and then moved over into a executive role in people and culture at Zillow. What advice do you have for HR professionals out there who are trying to navigate the current kind of social and economic climate and all the challenging things that are happening right now in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really the same method. There's no one right path as you're thinking about your own journey. I think people who are in HR type roles have the ability to think about everyone's journey in that. Policies and frameworks that embrace that, right? So it's everything from creating practices or are so many different facets of people's lives, and they don't all fit into these norms like I was talking about. But it's also as you're thinking about creating opportunities for people, it's kind of thinking about equitable opportunities where not everyone's starting from the same place in terms of what they've had access to past, or education or work experiences, or even the path they've taken, right? That really thinking more about and the evenly distributed potential that people have, and then how do you kind of create frameworks for learning and career navigation that isn't supposed to be linear, and that isn't supposed to be necessarily this predefined set of first you have to do this and then you can move to this. Creative and flexible about how you can really grow people in in both equitable ways, but in ways that, bring out the most fulfilling careers for employees. And that's not always going to be the next one on the ladder. And so I think HR has a unique opportunity to really kind of create that culture for a company.
Right. Now, speaking of equity, you've written a lot about that, about the importance of equity and inclusion in the workplace. What are some things that leaders should be doing right now to make their organizations more equitable and inclusive?
A big part of equity really is in recognizing that it's about saying not everyone's starting from the same place and giving everyone what they need to be. What one person might need to be successful is different than what another person might need to be successful, right? And sometimes that looks like mentorship, sometimes that looks like training, sometimes that looks like chances on people for opportunities based on the kind of the soft skills that they do have, and sometimes it looks like not being who's raising their hand and shouting the loudest with confidence, but instead kind of digging deeper and who might be right for an opportunity. There's better answer than like what's the one thing they need to do, because it's not like a checkbox kind of a thing. It's not like, oh, just take these 3 easy steps and you will be an equitable organization. It really is kind of digging deeper into what each employee needs and how you can facilitate that. And to be honest, the bigger the company, the more it becomes challenging to do that. And it's really about kind of creating pathways for employees and managers and leaders to all kind of demand those premises more, and then kind of dig deeper in kind of how they how they lead themselves and think through what everyone needs.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right about the checkbox thing, where there's a temptation to think, well, this is like Sarbanes-Oxley, like we just need to check off these boxes and we're compliant.
Yeah.
And it's just not like that. And there's we've had some conversations and we hear from our customers about the challenges of digital transformation, and that can mean a lot of different things. But a theme we hear is companies that sort of say, well, I've got someone handling digital. That doesn't work. It has to be something that the entire organization, especially the leaders, really embrace and drive, versus thinking it's something you can just have someone be responsible for it and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. So that resonates and that makes a lot of sense. Now, thinking about your own kind of personal path and your own, your journey through your career and your personal life, if you could go back to the person you were at the beginning of that journey and offer that young woman some advice, what would it be?
So I have heard this question before, so I have thought about it. Obviously, it's a question we all grapple with, Sure. So here's kind of the philosophical place I've ended up with this one, is that I wouldn't. Because every mistake I've made, every difficult thing I've navigated, everything I've screwed up has brought me the path that I'm on, and I dig it. I don't want to risk changing that. I'm getting philosophical here about like the butterfly, but I don't want to change it. And it's it's not, the goal isn't to like, oh, I wish I could avoid missteps. I wish I could go back and make my path more. It's like, no, like I'm proud of my completely curvy, nonlinear, and oftentimes completely path. And it's gotten me to this, and it's got some good stories out of it, Yeah. And so that's kind of the short answer, is like, no, I wish we shouldn't be trying to mess with that. Longer answer is that the one thing I might try to tell myself, which by the way, I'm a person that probably wouldn't have listened to like my time traveling self anyway, but is that there's a lot of passions that I've discovered later in life that bring me a lot of joy, and that it would have been if I'd been doing them for even longer. So like, for example, I just started writing like 5 or 6 years ago, and I love writing. And now I've written a book and I write for Forbes, like that's awesome. And I started doing aerial acrobatics when I turned 30, and I love it. So I've been doing it for the past 12 years now.
Wow.
It's been a really part of my life. But like, damn, those people that do that since they were much younger, incredible, So, and other kind of creative outlets and stuff. Giving yourself anything, it might be to like, hey, why don't you try out writing, try out acrobatics,
Mm-hmm.
try out some of this stuff and see where it takes you. And maybe I could have like just created some even cooler things because I started a little earlier on them.
Well, that's great. I appreciated both the short and long answer to that, and certainly it's
And
inspirational to hear.
answer,
And it's inspirational, to hear that, like to hear you share that you just really started writing seriously 5 or 6 years ago, and then you get a book out of it, right? And that's pretty cool. And I took a trapeze class with my wife once. It was something she wanted to do, which was fantastic. But I never crossed my mind to sort of like turn it into something I did more than once. And so I think that's really cool that you really got into it. That's awesome. One kind of pretty much almost final question that I want to ask, and it's something I try to ask all the people that have the privilege to talk with here, and that's we're a lot about books and the knowledge and ideas that you can get from books and ways to get those ideas into more people's hands. What is your favorite business book and why? And you can't use your own, unfortunately.
I don't totally consider mine a business book anyway, so it's okay. So I haven't read a ton of business books, to be honest. I'm a little bit of a learn as I doer. But I mean, I do read a lot, but not so much in the business genre. But I was reading when I started thinking about OwnTrail was called Burn the Business Plan. And I liked it. It basically, through data and anecdotal stories and, the idea that which is kind of the strategy to like everything I've been talking about here, is that like the businesses that have the most well-defined plans, where they think they know exactly what the model is going to be and how they're going to scale it and have all their forecasting down, and this is the path they're going to take, have a much lower success rate than the ones that are, much more active, they go and comfortable pivoting. And the part I liked is that actually, even though there's, this like image of like the really young Silicon Valley entrepreneur who, grows the unicorn or whatever, that like most successful entrepreneurs actually have experience under their belts and are older and have like a lot of lived experience that they apply. And it's kind of that combination of lived experience and the ability to be really kind of that does statistically result in the most successful startups and businesses. And so it kind of gave me the confidence more than anything who I am. I do have a lot of experience, and I, kind of, in fact, as I've been pitching Owntrail, there's some investors who are like, we need to know what your business model is, exactly what the forecasts are in the future, and exactly how you're going to grow to that. I'm like, I don't think they're the right fit for us, because like be consumer led in terms of our product roadmap, and we're really trying to be iterative in terms of like, what's working and what's impactful. And, as we learn more from this data, we're and like, yes, this will be a huge business, and yes, we're going to make a huge impact on women's lives, but we don't know the exact roadmap for that yet. There is no one right path, right? So it kind of gave me the confidence to embrace that idea and say like, yeah, this is not a bad way of doing it. There's intuition, experience, and there's data, and there's creativity, and you put all those things together and it can go in a pretty cool direction.
Great. Well, I hadn't heard of that one before. I will definitely check it out.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to see Owntrail.com, like, is it invite only? Is it open to anyone, or how do you?
No, it's open to everybody. We are, Owntrail.com. In terms of the ability to create and share trails and engage it, it's for it's open for anyone to check out, and everybody, regardless of how you identify, can always be reaching out to the really inspiring women in your lives to ask for their trail and learn more about where they've been. And so I hope that everybody will check that out, and we're on all the social channels to follow the journey as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rebekah. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to talk with you.
All right. Thank you.